Good morning. It's good to have you this morning here on this Mother's Day. Josh mentioned the theme of this year's VBS is shipwrecked. How many of you saw Tom Hanks in Castaway? My favorite all-time movie. I watch it at least once a year. The saddest part of that movie, I'm an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert. In other words, it's like people scare me. I'm not really shy, but I'm just an introvert. The saddest part of that movie was when that portion of that porta potty washed up on shore. I'm going, no, don't claim that as a sale. You've got it perfect. You're all alone on this great island. It's like no one else around. You and the fish, and you're eating. Oh, man. The introvert's dream is Tom Hanks on, that island. So I know I'm kind of weird that way. Today's Mother's Day, 2018, and I want to share with you about family. I'm going to talk to you about mothers. I'm going to talk to you about dads. I want to talk to you about aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas and all the other family members that fit into that arena. I want to talk about singles, and I want to talk about marrieds, and wherever you fit in that plan, I want to talk to you and where you are today. One thing I've recognized over the last 10 years is that the traditional family, mom and dad, kids, is really under attack. There's a whole lot of things coming against the traditional family because I happen to believe that as the family goes, so goes the country. That if you look down through history of time at nations as they've fallen, it's fallen from within with the deterioration of the family. And so the family is crucially important. Moms, you are crucially important during this time in our nation's history. Some say that the family is obsolete. I read an article this week that said that the family, really, the traditional family that we've known down through the history is out of date, old-fashioned. The one article even called it somewhat archaic to believe that the traditional family has worth and has value in today's culture. But I believe that the family does, and so that's why I'm going to talk to you. Once a year, we celebrate moms, and we celebrate how important you are to this fabric of our culture and our time. I want to speak to you today about what's a family for anyway. What's the big deal about the family? What's a family for? And the first area that I want to talk to you about, the big deal of the family, and I've experienced it in my own family, but I also recognize that in some of your lives, the family is or was the storm. I want to let you know I understand that. And when I talk today, I know that I'm talking to a wide range of people that come from all different types of families. Some incredibly healthy families, some incredibly unhealthy families. But I want to talk to you now because I believe that the church is the answer and wants to instill in our lives what a healthy family really is all about. What does it mean to live in a healthy family? What's the big deal about the healthy family? Why are moms and dads and grandpas so important? And the first area that I want to talk about, although there's so many, but I want to talk to you about 4 of them, is that a family is supposed to be a shelter from storms. I used to sail. Years and years ago, Jan and I sailed, and we never did any real deep water, blue water sailing like from here to Alaska or down to Hawaii or anything like that. But we'd sail over to Catalina. And we never did absolutely know fully what the weather was going to be like, although we could look at the weather forecasting and we could say it looks like it's going to be smooth sailing. Or sometimes we'd look at it and say, oh, the wind's going to peak at about 35 miles an hour today. And so that means that there's going to be some considerable waves that are going to pound up against the boat as we sail. And if the weather ever got really bad, if it ever got kind of raining and blowing all at one time, we'd look for a safe place. And we would look for a harbor of some kind that was a shelter to the storm. And there we would just simply anchor. And we would let the storm pass. A family centered on Christ is to be a protected cove that the people of that family can go into. Not just the children, but all of the family can enter into this protective cove and just be able to weather the storm. Because we all have tough days. We all have times in which we get rained on, kind of symbolically. We have bad weather days. We have those times in which there is a difficult season in our life. And I understand that. I'm speaking to a wide range of people. And some of you are in that place right now. You would probably categorize maybe the life that you're in right now as stormy seas. It's not fair weather. I was a fair weather sailor. I liked the fair weather. A light breeze, relatively flat water. But some of you would categorize yourself as being right now probably in a storm. Maybe you've been denied a safe harbor. Maybe your past, you can think of it that it was not a place of security, but it was a chaotic world. But we, I believe, in the church have a responsibility in our homes, no matter what ages we are, is to create an environment of safety and security where family members can come and find a place of quiet. A place where the winds aren't blowing. A place of rest, a place of shelter. It says in Proverbs 14, that reverence for the Lord gives a man and a woman deep strength. Their children have a place of refuge and security. It's really important that we that know Christ create this environment. And I've asked Valerie Fee to come forward and talk to us for a little bit about how her family, come on forward, Valerie, how her family creates a safe shelter, a refuge from the storm. And so, Val, thanks.
You're welcome. I don't normally do this, but, when Tom asks you to do something, you say yes. So I was reflecting this week on what Tom had asked me to speak on, and I've never really thought about how I parented. I just did it. And 4 things came to mind. With something that I think I was really purposeful in doing as a mother. And the first thing was honesty, really instilling the value of honesty with my girls. Without honesty, how can you weather the storms of life if you don't even know the real truth of what's going on in their lives? And so at a very young age, I really taught them how not to be afraid of being honest. And when they would want to lie, I would encourage them to tell the truth. And then I would praise them and thank them for being courageous and telling the truth, and always trying to have a very calm response and not react, because sometimes they would share things with me and my first thought was, are you kidding me? But I'd have to just kind of take a step back and just realize that that was hard to be honest. And so that whole honesty part of our family was we really built a family upon, we're going to be honest. And then with that came trust, because when you're really completely honest with people, then you build this really deep trust, because you see that they are, that they're not turning away from you, and that they love you. And it built this closeness in our family. which then led me to thinking that that was really unconditional love, is what we were demonstrating. So when they knew that they could come to us and share things with us, and when they were going through these storms in life, and as they got older, the storms got a little bigger when they get into middle school and high school and college, and they saw that we never turned away from them, and that our love was not based on their actions or their performance, that we were loving them unconditionally, even when they messed up, even when we were disappointed, that we weren't going to leave them, and that we were there for them. So it became a place where they knew they could come home and just be completely honest and know that we were going to help them figure this out. My love for them was never based on performance, and there was a book that we used to read to them when they were little, and it was, I love you forever, and I'll like you for always. And so that was kind of our family theme song, and it was like a chorus that we would say to each other is, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my babies, you'll be. No matter what you do, I'm going to love you. And the other thing that I was very intentional in doing is just investing my time with them. There was a certain point in my life where they were getting into middle school, and I thought, you know what, they need to be my ministry right now, because the world is crazy, and I know the enemy is going to be out to take my girls from me if he can, and I need to make them my ministry. So I just poured into them those middle school and high school years, got to know all of their friends, the families of the friends that they hung out with, tried to learn social media the best I could. I got volunteered in their schools, their classrooms. I would take them on missions trips. I tried to model, to them the best I could. I would take them on adventures. I'd try to have like a mother-daughter day right before school started, because I know anxiety would build up in them when they'd have to go back to school. So just investing my time with them, and that showed them that I really did care. And so those were the moments where we were able to build very close bonds in those times of just hanging out. And the last thing, and really the most important thing, was I just prayed. And prayed and prayed. I mean, the last 22 years, there were times I had no idea what to say or what to do when things would be happening. And the only thing I could say was, I have no idea. All I can say is, let's just pray. And when prayers were answered, they knew that it was because the Lord loved them and that their mom was praying for them. And there was times where I just had to go lock myself in my closet and just pray and pray and pray and fight for them. And they know. Sorry. It's hard. It's hard being a mom. And the only way you can get through it sometimes is with the Lord, and just giving it all to the Lord, and placing their lives down at the cross and saying, I have no idea what else to do, but you love them even more than I do. So I think those were the four main things that I was able to do to create this refuge for my girls. And it's been able to help them, I think, face the struggles that they've gone through and the difficulties in life. So,
thanks, Val. Moms and dads and single moms and single dads and grandparents raising grandkids all need to be very deliberate and prayerful in your approach to making the home a safe harbor, in which that home is a place where children can come and grandchildren can come, and great-grandchildren in some cases in our family here. A place they can come and they know that it's safe. They know that they'll be protected. They know that they will be spoken over with the things of God. They will begin to discover that that place of refuge, that home, is a place they can come back to. And they can come back to it time after time again after they grow up and grow old. It's a place where the fruit of the Spirit is manifest, of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are all areas of life that we continue to work through. Wherever we are in life, we continue to implant those things of the Spirit of God in our hearts and our mind and say, this is what I want my home to represent. I want my home to be a place of love and joy and peace. I want my home to be a place of perseverance and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness, faithfulness. I want it to be a place of self-control. And as we build those characteristics of the Spirit of God flowing through us, what happens is the home becomes a place of safety. It becomes a refuge. It becomes a safe harbor from the storms that certainly are going to come. But I also believe that as Christians, as we begin to live those things out, anywhere we go can be that safe harbor. A cup of coffee with a friend can be a safe harbor as you demonstrate the love and the joy and the peace and the fruit of the Spirit. That friend can feel that they are safe in our presence because they're going to get from us the things that Jesus would give. And as a result of that, our lives become a place of safety. Our lives become a safe harbor for people to come into our lives, and there they can find rest from the storms of life. I believe that's one of many areas of the family and why it's so important that we as Christians live out the quality of life that God wants for us. I think the second one that I'm going to mention, just the second of many, purpose of the family, is that the home is to be a learning center for life. The home is where we learn basic skills. Of course, we understand that the home is where we learn to walk, and the home is where we learn to talk. It's where we learn proper manners. Say, thank you, Tom. My parents should say that. Say thank you when I receive. Thank you. Now say please. Oh yeah, please. Please and thank you. Those are the proper ways to respond when things are given to us. We learn that stuff in the home. We learn how to use and control the remote, the key ingredient for skills that we need to learn, how to control that. I learned well from a dad that taught me. He says, this is how you do this, Tom. You pick up the remote early in the evening, and you put it in your pocket. And you don't just lay it down because your brother might pick it up or your mom might pick it up, and you've got to control that. Oh, that's how you do that, Dad. We learn these basic skills. It says in Psalms 144:12, this passage, it says, may sons and daughters in their youth be like plants that grow up strong. May sons and daughters in their youth be like plants that grow up strong. In other words, the Bible says that our family is to be a garden where children grow, where they learn. They're taught by their moms and their dads. They're taught, if you're a single mom, it's still where those children learn as the primary caregiver. It's taught in the homes of grandmas and grandpas. When our children have children and they come back into our home always remains this place of learning. It's a learning center. I've asked Kim Unzecker to come forward, and she's going to talk a minute or 2 or 5 or 10. She's a good speaker. That's why I have to ask her to share with you kind of how they make their home a learning center. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So last year, God was calling me to it. I knew it. I was terrified. It was the giant that I had been running away from for 17 years. And the giant threatened to burn my life to the ground. But Jesus said, set your face like a flint to the cross and die. Death in my kingdom is life. So I did. And when I did, God was with me. And I came out with a heart that didn't smell like fire, but was alive to something totally brand new. My call to share my unveiled life story with my family. Like I said, it was a giant 17 years in the making, and it was finally dead. For you, the calling might look different on your life, but the context of the question
of whose authority is ruling over your life is not. So for us and for our home, it's just about running after Jesus with all that we've got and inviting our kids to come along on the adventure with us. So leading up to that day, I felt God lead me to ponder just a few things, one of which is, what would I be teaching my kids if I didn't do this? Another thing was how he could cultivate in their heart this through taking him at his word and seeing him through. And then also, could this be a trophy of promise that I could entrust to him to give them during difficulty? So one of my goals is to give my kids a mother whose life has put the goodness of God on display. So how could I encourage them to embrace life head on, choosing not to be ruled by fear, but instead choosing to run after the true King, knowing that the Lord of heaven's armies goes before them? And I don't want to do it abstractly. I want to do it with concrete examples of how God's light has first broken into mommy and daddy's own heart. I don't want to just teach them about God. I want to teach them about life with God. And so it's in experiencing God's goodness, tasting and seeing that he's good, as I submit to his rule and reign and take every hostile and dark corner of my heart into submission in him. Tasting that, turning around and telling them. And then, number two, and the order is intentional there, and then it's out of that overflow of a heart in love with God, serving others and inviting them to be involved with that. So it's not practicing those deeds before them hypocritically, but it's doing them just as that expression, that overflow in sincerity. And so obviously this is just beginning for us. Our kids are little, and I can only dream about what this is going to look like just going forward. But recently my friend lost her husband, and I spent a lot of time with her in our home just practicing hospitality, listening. And at the end, we would pray, and Hannah was invited to pray with us as we would do that. Hannah's also been recently, she's been baking, and so she baked cookies for our growth group. She baked cookies today for Mother's Day. So it's just inviting her into that form of just being a blessing and being able to experience that for herself. We recently started sponsoring a little girl in the Philippines who shares the same birthday as Hannah, so she's the same age. And we have it in mind to really go all into this relationship with her. And Taylor and I have talked about, just like ways that we plan on doing this. So we've let Hannah know she's going to be growing up with this little girl, writing letters, hearing her story, and most importantly, praying for her as we're doing already. So overall, it's just trying to explain her days to her in a way, from the moment she wakes up to the moment she goes to sleep, in a way that starts teaching her about the way, the truth, and the life. And it's doing so she can connect with it. So it's leveraging talking points. So right now she's afraid of the dark. So we use that to talk about the darkness in our own hearts and her own heart, and Jesus as the answer for light. We take talking points from her stories, her books, her movies, like with the princess theme. We talk about how there is a kingdom, one that's coming from heaven to earth, and Jesus has made a way for her to be a part of it, and she can be his child, God's own child in this, or a princess. So it's just using things like that. It's meeting her where she's at. It's starting now, and it's doing it again, all day long, knowing that we only have this access to her in this special way for a short amount of time. And then overall, as Valerie said, it's prayer. I know that this is just starting, and the landscape is going to be ever-changing. but I can hold on to the God who is never changing, and I can encourage them to do the same, and it's hope. It's hope in that kingdom economy, in eternity's timeline, knowing that God can take even the small mustard seeds of faith of what I can give them and bring the kingdom, or he can use the small fishes and loaves and feed the multitude of need in their heart for their childhood. And by faith, I know that God can use these things in a way to bring about the greatest good in their life. Because for me, oftentimes, parenting just seems like the impossible task of perfect childhood by bedtime. And what is impossible with God is, what is impossible with man is possible with God. So I'm looking to him in faith for that. And then lastly, just as a working woman, I constantly have to fight the temptation to kind of just lay them at the altar for that success in whether it's career or ministry, whatever. It's remembering that my ministry to them comes first, in home first. So it's starting first in my marriage, out onto them, and then out onto others. So I have a quote in our house on our wall that says, "Children are not a distraction from greater work. They are the greatest work." So that's just to remind myself that. So overall, it is just running after Jesus with all that we've got. It's going into our own heart, like I said, going into our marriage, out onto others. And it's just looking to God for that light onto our path and the way that we should go.
Our family is continually a learning center. And a lot of that is caught as much as it's taught. It's the observation. People are watching. Children are watching. People watch other people. We are teachers whether we know it or not. We are teachers because people watch us, they listen to us, and they learn from us. Right or wrong, we are to learn how to be a healthy relationship within the family, good or bad. We learn how to relate to people. And some of us have learned bad and difficult ways to relate to certain people or to relate to people. We have to almost relearn them. But our happiness in life is really determined by how we get along with people. You can't have a good, happy, healthy, full life and not get along with people because we're in relationship constantly with people. That's why it's so important to be continually conformed into the very image of Jesus. Because Jesus had relationships, amazing relationships. I looked at the relationships that Jesus had this week. He hung around, and we'll talk about it in a minute. He hung around with tax collectors and sinners. He had a good time with them. And so our lives need to be healthy as we invest into the lives of others, the things that Christ has given to us. We live them out. I think of a story in my own life. My son was quite young at the time. I think he was 7, 8 years old, and we went into the grocery store, and we bought the things that we were going to buy, and we walked out, and I had the change in my hand, and I just about got to the car, and I said, "Oh, Dietrich, they've overchanged me. They've given me too much back. Here, I need to go back and give it back to them." And he looks at me, and he goes, "You're going to take that money and give it back to them?" I said, "Yeah, it's not my money. And for me to keep that would mean that I would steal that money." He goes, "Wow." And he followed me back in. And to this day, he reminds me of that lesson he learned. I didn't perceive it as a lesson. I just perceived it as living out Christ in me. And he learned. And so we learn. Lord, transform us, change us. Make the dysfunction that maybe we learned from our parents, because we all grew up in a dysfunctional home, right? I mean, no one is batting 1,000 here. We all grew up in a dysfunctional home, and my kids were raised in a dysfunctional home. Mine. Because I'm dysfunctional. And as a result of that, we all need this constant transformation that Jesus has promised to give to us. And so our homes can be a learning center. We learn relationships, but we also learn character in a home, honesty, truthfulness, as was spoken about. Our lives are living lessons to our children and to other people that watch us as we live out our lives before them, at work, at school, in the home. Our lives are living lessons to those that are around us. Have you ever heard the phrase, like father, like son, like mother, like daughter? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Have you ever heard those phrases? It just simply means that our lives are living lessons, and those that are closest to us pick up and learn what we have to offer them. And what we have to offer them is Jesus, ultimately. The greatest lesson is don't be like me, be like Jesus, but I'm going to try to be as much like Jesus as the Spirit of God in me rises up. And so we transfer lessons that we've learned to others. Isaiah 38 says, each generation makes known God's faithfulness to the other. Jesus was a single man, but he was a teacher, and people learned from him. Our homes are learning centers, as inspired by the Spirit of God in us. So if you're a parent or a single parent or a single mom or dad, or if you're a grandmother or grandfather or great-grandmother or great-grandfather, you are still a living lesson to those around you. I remember my dad and mom sang in a choir at a church that I grew up in, and at that time the choir was in what was called the choir loft behind the pastor. So they would be back here, and they would stay through the whole service there because they would close the service with a song. And I remember one time I was sitting on the very back. All the youth group sat in the very last pew, crowded in there. And I was watching it, and I was going, okay, service about over. Good. Man, this thing's really gone on. It's about over. And right before the last song, I saw my dad do this. He's sitting down in the choir loft. My mom's next to him, and he does this. That's what men do when they're starting to cry. They go, hope no one's watching me. And he wiped a tear out of his eye. I knew that's what he was doing. I could tell. And I thought, what did my dad just hear that caused him to cry? There must be something in this message that he just heard. Something caused him to cry. There must be some form of power in the message. And I filed that away. And it really didn't come back to me for years later when I discovered that was a lesson that God was allowing me to witness, that the power of the gospel message, the power of the Word of God can change people and even stir them to the point to where they become emotional. There must be something there more than just another word. And it was one of the puzzle pieces of my life that actually brought me to Christ at a later time. And so our lives are a learning center. Our lives are to be a safe harbor. The third reason the family is to be a place of fun, I think. A party, laugh. Is your family a place of fun? See, is it a place of gladness? Is it a place of laughter? I believe that Jesus is perfect in all of his balance, all of the aspects of his life. I believe that Jesus had fun with his disciples, sitting around those campfires at night. I think they were telling jokes. I think they were laughing at each other. I think they were talking about the events of the day. I think they were just having a good time, a fun time together. I believe that Jesus was perfect in his humor, which is a part of our lives. How would Jesus have fun today? If he were here, how would Jesus have fun today? Let's see. I don't know. I don't suspect he'd probably do it quite that way, but I thought that was a fun video. Our families need to be places of fun, a place where we laugh together. Why? Because there is so much out there that takes away laughter, doesn't it? It takes away laughter. It takes away fun. Do you remember your home being a fun place? Are you fun to be around? Would people say, I like being around you because you're fun? We have a good time around you. Matthew, it says in Luke 5:29 that Jesus was a fun guy. He liked a good party. He liked a really good party. He says this in Matthew 5:29. Then Levi, Matthew, held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with him. So here's Levi. Matthew, he says, Jesus, come on. I've got a whole bunch of friends. And I want you to come over to my house, and we're going to have a party together. And it says that he had a great party, a big banquet, that Jesus was the guest of honor. I think Jesus had fun at that party. I think he walked around, introduced himself. Hi, I'm Jesus. Oh, yeah, I'm Matthew, I'm Levi. I think he had fun. The Bible doesn't really picture the emotions oftentimes of a time, but that was a party. Levi was intending that to be a party, a great banquet, lots of food. Jesus loved a good party. He was fun-loving. I really believe that. I believe that when he was walking with his disciples, he wasn't just teaching them all the time about the things of God. I think he was saying, hey, tell me about your life. Well, I saw you over there trying to heal that guy. You really did a lousy job, but I admire your efforts. It was so funny. I wouldn't have done it that way in any way whatsoever. But you try. And then he would say, well, try it this way next time. I think Jesus just enjoyed being around people. I think he loved having fun and laughing. I think in heaven it's going to be filled with laughter. I think we're just going to laugh and have fun and enjoy our Lord forever. Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding, and he turns water into wine. The wedding host had run out. And so Jesus turns these big buckets of water into wine. The Son of Man came eating and drinking in Matthew 11. And they say he is a glutton and a drunk, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. You see, people looked at him and said, he's a glutton, he's a drunk. Why? Because he was going to these parties. But he wasn't a drunk and he wasn't a glutton. He was just having a fun time, I believe. I believe he played. I believe that he laughed with his family when he went over to Mary and Martha's house and their brother Lazarus. I think they sat around and I think they had fun together, told jokes to each other. I think. Because that's kind of what I do, and I think I like having fun. This is fun. I can picture Jesus. He goes, hey guys, I got a good one for you. There was this Jewish rabbi, this Catholic priest, and he wouldn't have done that. There were just Jewish rabbis at the time. But I think he just enjoyed laughing with people walking along the trail. So it's a family. This family is a shelter from life's storm. It's a learning center for life. It's a place of fun. And then the last one I want to cover is that it's a launch pad for ministry. And the worship team can come over. Some are still praying for your sons and daughters and your relatives to find Christ so that it can be a launch pad for ministry. Continue to pray. Don't stop praying. I'd say include fasting in there for your loved ones. Paul and Silas were supernaturally set loose from prison in Acts 16, And it says that the jailer brought them to his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole family. Keep praying for your family. I'm still praying for my family. I can't figure out why they don't want Jesus like I have, but I'm continuing to pray for them. Find opportunities to minister together if your family knows Christ, if that's possible. Find opportunities. Jan and I remember when we lived up in the Fresno area, Jan would always have packets, bags of food, because there's so much homelessness up there. She would always have bags in the back seat. And our kids started to say, hey, Mom, I see up the street here, there's a guy. Looks like he's homeless. And Jan would pull over. Our kids would say, hey, got some food for you here. And they'd usually have a pair of socks in there and sometimes a comb and a razor in there. But we always ministered together. We always found opportunities to do things together. We never passed up the opportunity as a family to find something that we could do in the name of Christ. It says in Romans 12:13, when God's children are in need, help them out and get into the habit of inviting guests home for dinner, or if they need lodging for the night. Ministry of hospitality is so important, I think, nowadays. The church needs to be seen, not just heard. This is a place where we come and we are filled with the gladness of just being together as a family, and we invite the presence of the Holy Spirit to come and to minister to us. But out there is the ministry. The real ministry is out there. It's when you walk out there today and you're going home, when you get into your home, that's where the real ministry takes place. And so find opportunities to minister together. Create a shelter from storms. Create a learning center for life. Create a place of fun. Have fun. Laugh. Enjoy things. Every Christmas time when our kids were growing up, we had a week-long, on their week off, we had a week-long poker game. That's what we did in our house. I grew up, my dad was in the military, and he taught me how to play poker by the time I was 8 years old. And so we'd have a week-long poker game. We'd get the chips out, and we'd distribute them all. Everyone had like $1.5 million with all these chips and everything. And we'd have a week-long game. We'd play about 2 hours every night. And then the very last night, Christmas Eve night, what we'd do is everyone was all in. And we had one more hand. And the winner of that last hand took the whole pot. But we laughed and we had fun, and my kids were trying to learn how to bluff. They were terrible at it. Terrible at it. They didn't know how to play, and they were just trying to learn how to bluff me into something. But it was so much fun. I'll always remember those games, and our kids remember them. And I suspect they'll teach their kids how to play poker. And, you know, let's stand together. If you're here this morning and you grew up in a dysfunctional home, you know, you're with about 150 other people that did. But maybe you were hurt. Maybe you were wounded. Maybe you still remember the hurts. Maybe your heart was hurt in that home that you grew up in. Maybe your family wasn't a shelter from the storms. Maybe it was the storms. God's here. God's here ready to touch your life, and he says, I'll bring you into my family, which is a perfect family. He says, I'll touch your life. I'll minister to you. I'll give you all that you need. I'll heal your wounds. I'll heal your hurts. I'll be a mother to you. I'll be a father to you. I'll be an uncle that loves you. I'll be a grandfather. Jesus can be everything that we need. Everything that we need. And so if you're here today and you need ministry, I'm going to ask you to do something. If you've got wounds from your family of origin, they might be little wounds. They might be a harsh word that was spoken at you out of anger. that was almost unintentional, but that wound still penetrated your heart. Would you let us be a part of God's healing to you today? If that's you today, if you're here and you were wounded in your family of origin and you still remember, that wound is still pretty fresh. It's still hot. I'm going to ask you to do something. Would you step out from where you are right now as we go into this last song? And would you come forward? Because I believe that God wants to do something. I believe that He wants to touch you, and He wants to heal you, and He wants to show you what a healthy dad really is, or a healthy mom is. I want you to step out from where you are and just come forward. Whoever's in between you and the aisle, they'll let you out. Just come forward. Don't hold this in. You know if it's you. You know the wound that might still be there. Just come on forward. There you go. God understands. He understands. He knows that the wound hurt. He knows the pain that you feel. And if the ministry team would come forward, and I want you just to lay your hands on these people. And when these people touch you, what they've experienced, what you're experiencing is Jesus' touch. And the Father's saying that He wants to touch your life and heal you and restore you. So just begin to minister to these that are here, and let's sing this last song. If you're here this morning and you've yet to give your life to Christ, salvation is available to you today. People are being saved here. Salvation is available. But God is asking you to take a step, a risk, of faith, and just simply say, today is the day that I give my life to Jesus. Today's the day I choose to lay down my will and I pick up the will of God. Today is the day I will receive His forgiveness in exchange for my sin. It's happening right now. So, Father, I pray that you lift off now the hurts and the wounds that as family has spoken the harsh words. I pray that the wound be healed, that you would extend your hand, Lord, and bring healing. That where there's been a grudge that's been held, I pray that you would show forgiveness. Lord, that you'd bring salvation in Jesus' name. That you'd bring salvation. Lord, we want to be good moms and dads and aunts and uncles. We want to be good, Christ-centered grandparents, grandmas, grandpas, great-grandmas, great-grandpas, aunts and uncles. And so we ask for your filling, that we would leave here more like Jesus, and that our homes would be that shelter, that place of fun, that place of learning, and that place of ministry. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you need ministry, come on down. We'll have our prayer team that will remain here. They'll speak into your life. God bless you. Happy Mother's Day.